everybody. So, today we finish Chamber of Secrets. And today I want to talk about memory. So, Chamber of Secrets is kind of the history of Hogwarts book. So memory has really been a theme throughout, in big, obvious ways and in smaller, sneaky ways. One of my favorite small, sneaky ways is in chapter 5, when the Weasleys are driving to the train station and Ginny realizes that she's forgotten her diary. And the whole plot of this entire book hinges on her remembering to go back for that diary. But the last third of the book is when memory really becomes just like a huge theme. Harry finds Tom Riddle's diary, which contains Tom's memories from 1943, as well as some sort of interactive memory Tom. We learn that Gilderoy Lockhart uses memory charms to obliviate people and take credit for their stories. And when he tries to do this to Harry and Ron, it backfires because of Ron's broken wand, and Lockhart's memory is erased. Ron and Harry realize that ghosts might have useful memories, and they ask Moaning Myrtle about her death, which turns out to be really useful for entering the chamber. We find out that Ginny's been having these memory lapses at the same time as students are being petrified. And crucially, Tom Riddle, aka Voldemort, doesn't remember that Phoenix tears heal wounds, so he just kind of stands there and watches as Fawkes saves Harry's life. And I'm sure that there's tons more examples that you're going to read about in your reading responses, which, side note, I love reading your reading responses. I have so much fun with all of your observations and questions, and I don't respond to all of them, but I love reading them, so just want to let you know that. But okay, so anyway, there's just a lot I could talk about with memory in this last third of the book, but I just want to touch on a few things. So the first is Dumbledore's famous lines in Hagrid's house when he's being sacked as headmaster. He turns to where Harry and Ron are hidden behind the invisibility cloak, and he says, "You will find that I have only truly left this school when none here are loyal to me." And to me, this starts to tie together loyalty, legacy, and memory. Because in the immediate sense, this is really relevant for this book. When Harry is loyal to Dumbledore in the Chamber of Secrets, that's when Fawkes comes to him and brings the sorting hat that he pulls the sorting hat from which he pulls the sword of Gryffindor. But it's also relevant later. So Dumbledore is 110 years old, eventually he will die, and his statement will become about his memory. Dumbledore remains at Hogwarts for as long as his memory is alive and revered. And when I think about a certain scene at King's Cross Station later in the series, I'm really reminded of this line. But I also think this line can apply to both Salazar Slytherin and Voldemort. Slytherin has created this chamber and put a basilisk in it that emerges out of a statue of himself when Tom says, "Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four." It's 1,000 years later, but Slytherin has not truly left this school because of the loyalty to him. And his memory is very much alive in ways that are dangerous, all kinds of different dangerous ways. And then there's Voldemort. Because Lucius Malfoy is loyal to him, Voldemort also hasn't really left the school. Tom Riddle says to Harry, "Dumbledore's been driven out of this castle by the mere memory of me." So this intertwining of memory, legacy, and loyalty doesn't really favor either side, but it makes me wonder who else's memory lingers at Hogwarts, and what actions loyalty to that memory might inspire. Whether those are things that we see in these books, or sort of lurking in the background outside of our story. Another area where I really see memory is with the Ford Anglia that's been hanging out in the Forbidden Forest. It recognizes Harry and Ron when they follow the spiders into the forest. And Fawkes gets a lot of credit for saving Harry in the Chamber of Secrets, but I think that the car should get equal credit for saving Harry and Ron from Aragog's spider family. In reading this chapter, I wondered whether all magical objects have memories of the people who've owned them, either in the present or in the past. We know that this is true of wands, but there's not a lot of emphasis on it elsewhere in the books that I can remember. So if the situation with the car is maybe a little unusual, I'm thinking that it might be another connection between loyalty and memory. And if that's the case, I have two possible readings of the car's particular memory and loyalty to Ron and Harry. The first reading is that the car remembers and is fond of Ron because he's freed it. The car has become sentient in this weird transfiguration way, and Ron has kind of accidentally set it free, and so the car is grateful and loyal to Ron. And that would also prefigure Harry's relationship with Dobby. My second reading is that the car remembers and protects them because of Arthur Weasley's magic. And what I like about this possible reading is that there's echoes of Lily's magic protecting Harry and Dumbledore's magic protecting Harry, but with this interesting twist, because Lily's magic protects an innocent baby, and Dumbledore's magic protects Harry as he does something heroic. And in both those cases, it's easy to see the person being protected as someone who's really worthy. But in this case, Arthur's magic is still there for Ron and Harry after they've done something so stupid and illegal, leading to Arthur being investigated at his job and fined 50 galleons, which we can remember from the visit to their Gringotts vault. They don't really have that money. So to me, this is such a lovely symbol of the Weasleys and the kind of parents that they are. So my MVP for these chapters, is definitely Arthur Weasley and his heroic forward to Anglia. I also want to talk about how books connect to memories within this book. We see three main instances of this connection in these chapters. The most obvious one is Tom Riddle's diary, which contains both the person of Tom Riddle, as he was in 1943, and his memories of that time. This sort of semi-autonomous person of Tom Riddle seems to be a unique feature of this diary, which we later learn is a Horcrux. But it's not clear whether the other feature, these memories that Harry can kind of dive into and be part of, is something that other magical books might be able to do in the magical world. I don't think we see it in any other books in the series, but it is similar to the Pensieve, which we'll see in book 4. And actually, one of my colleagues from neuroscience is going to do a Potter Watch episode about memories and the Pensieve when we get there. Secondly, there's Lockhart's books, which contain other people's memories, and Lockhart has obtained these memories and then obliviated their original owners. He's like a really violent plagiarist. And then finally, there's the most ordinary kind of book, which is the library book, with the entry on basilisks, which Hermione rips out and annotates with the word pipes. And of course, we can already think of books as preserving the memories of their authors, but in this case, when Hermione is petrified and can't speak, Ron and Harry learn what it is that she realized through this piece of her memory preserved on paper. The characters' relationships to books and to the book's authority also stands out to me, especially Ron and Hermione. Ron reacts to books with skepticism. He's a so-so student and books just aren't really his thing. But in some ways that makes him a more careful, critical reader. He's the first person to really say, Lockhart's books only say he's done these great things. Ron is considering Lockhart's memories in the context of what he already knows about Lockhart, and he finds his first-hand evidence of Lockhart's incompetent pixies lesson far more compelling than the books. When Harry finds the diary in the bathroom, Ron repeats his dad's warning that books are dangerous. He actually reacts to the diary with more fear than almost anything else in the series besides maybe spiders. Like, he's terrified of a book. And we learn that Ron is totally right. This diary is dangerous. But I also get a chuckle out of this passage because I think it's also a wink from J.K. Rowling. Because by the time she's writing Chamber of Secrets, the book banners are already freaking out about Sorcerer's Stone and how it's dangerous and it's going to lead their children unwittingly into dangerous occult stuff. So it's kind of funny that this diary leads Ginny unwittingly into dangerous occult stuff. But getting back to Ron. So it's interesting that he doesn't have this skeptical reaction to the page about the basilisk. And maybe that's just because it sort of clicks all the pieces into place for him. Or maybe it's because while he's skeptical of books, he really does trust Hermione, and her annotation is that last piece that they need. But in contrast to Ron, in Chamber of Secrets, Hermione reacts to books without much skepticism at all. When Harry finds the diary, Hermione shows no caution or hesitance about experimenting on it and trying to learn from it. She's also totally taken in by Lockhart's books. It's implied that her crush on Lockhart is the reason for this, that she's blinded to the truth by her sort of preteen crush. But in general, Hermione is pretty trusting of authority at this stage, especially written authority. When she has her epiphany about what's going on, she goes directly to the library. This great line, "When in doubt, go to the library," that we associate with Hermione is actually Ron's line. Harry asks, but why she gotta go to the library? And Ron says, because that's what Hermione does. When in doubt, go to the library. Hermione is an avid reader, and she really does trust books. But one little thing that we do see, which seems like a shift, is that she rips the basilisk page out of the book. And that's partly a plot device so that Ron and Harry can find it later. But it's also the first time that we see Hermione's attitude toward books becoming a little bit more complicated. Her awe of books and their authority is not enough to prevent her from defacing this priceless old book and taking this information just for herself. After Chamber of Secrets, Hermione starts to become a much more cautious reader and more skeptical of authority. We'll see this in Order of the Phoenix, when Hermione is the one who reads between the lines of Umbridge's opening speech and realizes what the Ministry's approach is going to be that year. And we'll see this in Half-Blood Prince, when Hermione and also Ginny treat the annotated potions textbook that Harry's using with much more caution than Harry and Ron, directly calling back to Tom Riddle's diary. And that brings me to the last thing that I want to touch on related to memory. In the last chapter, Dumbledore says to Ginny, "There's been no lasting harm done, Ginny." And I know he's trying to be kind because Ginny's feeling anxious and guilty about all the trouble that Voldemort's caused through her, but it's not exactly accurate. It's back to this all's well that ends well approach to trauma that they have at Hogwarts. Because Ginny is traumatized. She's been possessed for months, almost a whole school year. She's been kidnapped, she's had her life force sucked out of her almost to the point of death. Memories of this will haunt her, and it seems pretty likely that Hogwarts has no mental health care plan for her beyond hot chocolate. Meanwhile, Hagrid has been locked up in Azkaban as a precaution, and we'll talk about the Wizarding World's justice system in the next book, but from what we're going to learn about Azkaban, Hagrid is certainly traumatized too, and re-traumatized from having to relive the memories of 50 years ago, when he was framed for opening the Chamber of Secrets the first time, and he was never really exonerated. Dumbledore's first order of business, after talking to the kids, is to write to Azkaban, and it's good that he remembers that promptly, but nothing can undo Azkaban. The memories of that experience are a lasting harm. So, on that dark note, I'll wrap up my thoughts on what's actually a pretty dark book. Harry Potter and Beyond discusses the different genres that influence the series, but I would add that this particular book uses a lot of the tropes of Gothic novels, which kind of explains the mood and the sort of darkness that overlays the entire book. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about what you thought about the book in a little while.